Consider a single human brain throughout a 24-hour cycle. It generates the quiet rhythm of deep sleep, the intense focus of logical problem-solving, and the chaotic imagery of vivid dreaming. We are left to explain how one physical structure produces such vastly different outputs. Complex systems theorists describe this as a paradox of multiplicity. A unified biological substrate yields a staggering diversity of conscious and unconscious experiences, seemingly without breaking its own continuity. Classical cognitive science attempted to solve this by dividing the brain into discrete mechanical categories. This approach assigned separate systems for memory, independent networks for emotion, and isolated states for sleeping and waking. However, this fragmented view struggles to account for the seamless transitions we experience. Thoughts blur into emotions. Waking life transitions into sleep. A model relying on isolated boxes fails to map the uninterrupted flow of subjective experience. Resolving this tension requires a move away from static categories. It demands a structural paradigm that explains how a unified field generates multiplicity through its own internal dynamics. The Brain Kinematics Model, or BKM, addresses this by proposing a dynamic regulatory continuum. In this model, all mental activities emerge from a single, evolving physiological field, rather than separate compartments. To understand the implications of this continuum, we look to a 17th century parallel, Mulla Sadra's transcendent philosophy. These frameworks operate in different domains. BKM is a model of biological cognition and neuroregulation. Sadra's work is a system of metaphysics and theology aimed at the nature of the cosmos. Despite these different goals, the two systems exhibit a structural isomorphism, a shared logical architecture used to solve the problem of unity and diversity. The BKM framework offers a functional and neurocognitive parallel to Sadra's metaphysics of existence, a claim we can verify by mapping the mechanics of both systems side by side. The first shared parameter is the location of reality. Both systems posit that a unified substrate lies beneath every surface manifestation. Sadra argued that wujud, or existence, is the primary reality. On the left of this diagram, we see how he viewed different beings, from minerals to humans, as manifestations of this single existence appearing in different forms. He called this tashkik el-wujud, or the gradation of existence. In this view, a plant and an animal are not different types of reality. They are the same existence expressed at different intensities. BKM applies this logic to the brain. Deep sleep, dreaming, and focused attention are shown here not as separate systems, but as varying degrees of organization within a common regulatory continuum. Within this architecture, highly integrated consciousness represents a greater intensity of the underlying continuum, much like human intellect represents a greater intensity of existence in Sadra's system. Classical philosophy and early neuroscience often shared a static bias, treating reality and brain states as fixed structures that only changed through external influence. Sadra challenged this with his doctrine of harakat al-jawhariyah, or substantial motion. Substantial motion describes the continuous internal transformation of a thing's very being. It defines reality as an ongoing process of becoming, rather than a collection of static objects. This aligns with BKM's framework, where neural strain patterns and activity pathways are in constant reorganization. The physical substrate of the brain is never static. It is always in transition. In both models, a conscious state is defined as an ever-evolving trajectory, rather than a fixed entity. The focus on dynamic becoming often invites a comparison to the German philosopher Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. Hegel's model of becoming develops through a dialectical process. It relies on contradiction, negation, and higher synthesis to drive history and thought forward. Sadra's model differs in its driver. His becoming develops ontologically through internal gradation and the pursuit of existential intensity, not through historical conflict. BKM follows this Sadrian logic. The brain's regulatory states do not move through dialectical contradictions. They evolve through varying levels of organizational coherence. While both are philosophers of process, the internal organizational gradation found in BKM makes it a structural relative of Sadra rather than Hegel. Mapping neurocognitive models often leads to a theoretical trap, treating the continuum as a conceptual category or an essence. Sadra defined essence, or mahiya, as an intellectual abstraction, a boundary the mind creates to label things like humanity or treeness. Viewing the BKM continuum as a conceptual bucket to hold different brain states turns it into a static abstraction. It freezes a reality that is actually in motion. Sadra's Primacy of Existence argues that existence is the true, active reality, while these essences are merely secondary mental labels we apply to it. The BKM continuum operates as the literal, active biological substrate. It is the generating foundation for all mental activity. In this functional sense, the continuum plays the same role in BKM that dynamic wujud plays in Sadra's metaphysics. We can formalize this bridge. The regulatory continuum maps to wujud. The different levels of consciousness map to Sadra's degrees of existence. The evolution of strain flow mirrors substantial motion. Both systems identify internal, continuous change as the engine of reality. Acknowledging these parallels also requires noting their different ends. BKM aims at biological regulation and adaptation within a physical brain. Sadra's system aims at ontological perfection and spiritual proximity to a source. The destinations differ, but the structural geometry used to navigate from unity to multiplicity is identical. Both frameworks lead to the same conclusion. Knowledge and learning are not passive. They alter the continuum itself. In BKM, learning reorganizes the regulatory field. This provides a biological basis for Sadra's unity of the knower and known, where the act of knowing transforms the being of the knower. To analyze a complex system, whether it is the human brain or the nature of existence, we must move past the search for fixed, static entities. Reality at every scale is continuous, dynamic, and defined by its ongoing process of becoming.